May of 1983. I'm coming out of college. I'm looking for a job. I had been groomed to be a computer paper salesperson because that's what my dad did. I worked in the factories. I worked for a broker. And then I realized I don't want to work for my dad. and by being the boss's son was just not a fun thing. And I met a guy that put ink on paper because in the old days, that's the only way you could get your computer output.
Right.
And there was this fascinating machine called the IBM 3800 that all the big data center operators had that printed 124 pages a minute. And there was one of these in every big data center on the planet. So
now was it wasn't a laser printer, it was that?
No, it was a laser printer.
Oh, it was?
Not
Okay.
dot matrix. It was the first high-speed laser printer. It was 124 pages a minute.
Okay.
And I walked into First Interstate Bank in San Francisco, which later became Wells Fargo.
Okay.
And I saw the round reel 3420. I mean, I've been doing this a long time.
Right.
Yeah, ages you. And I was in data centers and just kind of stumbled into it just because I didn't want to do what I was groomed to do.
Right.
And then we started doing tape racks, and then we started doing 19-inch racks because we were bending steel and painting steel, and maybe this distributive compute thing's going to be big, and the MVS guys are going to take it over. So that's kind of how it started. And my path to Vertiv was I had probably 9 or 10 really cool products, most of which never made it, which happens a lot.
Right.
Just because you have the best thing doesn't mean it's going to make it. You have to have marketing, you have to have muscle, you have to have financing. But I was selling airflow manipulation products, CFD capabilities, along with the racks. Started selling Avocent digital switches.
Wow.
And it was a great product. 67% of the data centers ended up adopting that technology. It was quite a ride. And Emerson bought Avocent, and that's how I got into the Emerson Liebert family as a customer.
And explain what Emerson primarily did back then.
So
Emerson and Liebert.
Emerson's a huge holding company. They they paid dividends for 56 years in a row. I call it a grandma stock, which is a great thing if you're a grandma.
Right.
Right. I mean, they committed to paying dividends. They did it very well, and they bought companies that dominated their space.
Okay.
Avocent dominated that space. Liebert dominated the space of air cooling.
Okay.
Yeah. And we got spun out officially as an IPO in February of 2020, 15 days before the world came to a stop.
Oh, wow. So they spun off and formed Vertiv.
Yeah, so we exited Emerson with the help of Platinum Equity, a private equity company, and like most, they're going to hold you for 3 or 4 years. They're going to either break you up or make you better so they could package you for somebody else.
Right.
Fortunately for us, they were about making you better, and so they went and bought Energy Labs. They bought Guy, so they saw gaps in our portfolio. Right. So let's put some more pieces in here, and then we will do an IPO. And I'm very proud to report this week we came out at $4 billion valuation, and this week we hit $50 billion.
Wow!
So pretty exciting ride. Right place, right time, great vision.
We're going to talk about luck later.
Yeah.
I actually wrote it down. I don't normally write stuff down, but I wrote it down. It's amazing how lucky people get in our space when
you put luck with execution, good things happen.
Yeah, and so I'm being a little tongue in cheek because I suppose you could get a bad luck, where just unfortunate circumstances come together. But it is extremely rare. Let me say it differently. I know a whole heck of a lot of hardworking, brilliant idea people that refine something over a long period of time, and then all of a sudden they're an overnight, hit. They ignore the 30 years of, practicing singing in your dad's barn for the Iowa State Fair or whatever, and all of a sudden you're at Madison State Garden, and people are like, "Oh, you're lucky."
I know no better example of that in our industry than Jensen Huang.
Oh, for sure.
Everybody thinks that this happened in the last 24 months, 36 months, but you meet his team and there's people who have been there 24, 26 years. They were a gaming company that nobody ever heard of other than gamers.
Yeah. I got to meet him.
Me too.
At a data center thing, nowhere near the intense that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
It had to be 2018. Like it couldn't have been no later than 19, but I'm almost certain it was 2018. I was invited with a number of other data center folks and one of my good friends at our company QTS, Chris Brown. And we spent most of the day with his team, and all they were doing was introducing us to their vision and ideas and some of the hardware, which, by the way, infinitesimal compared to what is just the last year.
Amazing what's happened in
But at the
36
time,
months.
at 2018, we're like, wow, this is really, and they were super serious about, that's what I really respected about that group. One, they knew not just their hardware architecture, but they knew data centers. This is always the key to me, especially when you come out of the IT space. A lot of data center organizations come out of the real estate space, if not all of them, don't understand this. They might know a little bit of telecom because they picked up some telecom assets along the way. But if you don't have that trifecta of the heavy IT background, you don't understand how you have to balance all of this stuff. We would call it, my podcast is tired of me talking about it, but the compute with the storage with the network, or whatever your three legs of the stool are.
Yep.
Because work is made or done.
And don't forget the facilities.
And facilities, for sure. I mean, that's sort of the first level of intersection, the thing that makes a military great is their command and control.
Right.
And then their ability to understand and execute a mission and the ability for troop welfare. So all things I talk about.
Why do you think all the servers that were on everybody's desk went back to the data center? It was about command and control, and the MVS guys knew how to do it.
Absolutely.
I called them the ponytail guys. Microsoft was taking over the world.
I came to work today wearing a ponytail.
Yeah.
You rat me out like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I remember I was calling on an insurance company downtown, and it's like, we're getting rid of our data center. My wife cried because we got a thing in the mail that said data centers are dead.
Right.
Because distributive compute and Microsoft and everybody had a computer under their desk.
Sure.
And that guy told me, and this is back in 1990,
right,
that they identified through an audit they had 1.5 million in duplicate site licenses for the software to run the desktop.
Sure.
And that was kind of the tip of the iceberg, that we need some command and control.
Right.
We're going to bring this back into the data center. These guys know how to run things that are mission critical and that can't go down.
That's right.
And that was kind of the beginning of saving the data center.
That's right. Well, and they invented dedupe software that allows all this other stuff. My point just is that, so we meet with Jensen and we see this excellence, not only in their IT stuff, but in their facility. So in order software. So what they say is, so the problem we're solving is this, is sort of what they started off with. They started with why. Yeah. Why do we have you here? We believe that we can create through our assets or our product set of this. Yeah. I don't think they envisioned an LLM or any of these other things, but they had an idea. Well, in order to do that, I have to have a software layer that looks like this. Yep. In order for that software layer to do this, it lives on a hardware layer. Yep. And in order for a hardware layer to live like this, it has to live within an environment, a data center environment, that looks like this. Yep. You guys are data center people. You're the root or the foundation of this thing. My customers are at the other end of it, the users of this thing. And so, we do these parts. Right. So we want you in here listening to what we're doing. We're going to be very transparent. Yep. You got to sign your NDA. And by the way, my frenemies were all there. Right. And we want you to get certified, and we want you to think about this stuff. It was incredible in how we've had conversations like that before. Yeah. But for it to be that detailed and that who's doing what by when and how demised it was, they also wanted a standardization so that I could go to
scale.
Not just scale, but so that they can go to any of these competitors and it fits. It's like your VHS tape. Yep. Buy from Pioneer, Sony, whoever, doesn't matter, so long as this fits,
works.
And you can work on the features and benefits of your application. It has to run off of that 120 volt or 208, whatever Chuck agrees that we can do, Mr. Mom. But it has to, and the customer has to have this experience. So that was pretty phenomenal how detailed it was and how sophisticated his teams were in all of those areas. We had a very similar thing because we come from the IT world and how to learn how to balance compute, network, storage, and then how we communicated with the facility, not just the build and the operate and the heat, but logistics, security, all of it.
Right.
And you just got really good. Like there was no, we're outsourcing that or it's somebody else's, we just did it ourselves.
You had to take total control.
And so then I got to meet Jensen at that thing. So I just thought that, well, he got lucky, quote unquote lucky, hired some of these guys. I'm telling you, that culture, not just of innovation and hard work, like they just solve problems. Yeah. He is a force of life. He reminds me of my CEO. He reminds me of many CEOs that they have on the periphery the way they might be more extroverted or more introverted. They might be more engineering minded as opposed to art or artistic minded, but there's some kind of core to them that I don't care what
They have
industry.
a vision and a passion.
Pick them up, drop them in a new thing they catch a vision about, and poof, off they go. He was personable. Usually CEOs or people, executives, you know, at least in our industry, aren't really huggy. You and I are, because we're an aberration.
That's what we do.
But he was, I would call him a hugger, but he came up, shook my hand, put my hand on my shoulder, like to make that connection, to get to know me.
It's very personal.
It was, I don't know how we became
real.
fanboys for Nvidia, but it's really pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it's funny. Their impact on our industry has been extraordinary, and they're making all of us better.
Yeah.
Right, because we want to be part of what they're trying to do. And I think I met their team about a year after you. I think it was around 2019.
Okay.
And it was strictly by accident. They had successfully sold some, I think it was A100 technology to a healthcare provider. Right. And when you put it all together, it was 26 kilowatts a rack. And they had 5 data centers, and the largest, hottest rack, dense rack they had was 12.
Right.
And somehow the deputy CIO didn't run it through their normal processes, didn't do the modeling, the CFDs, didn't get sign-off from facilities.
By the way, explain what CFD is to people who don't know.
A computational fluid dynamics study that shows you, can you manage the heat and get the cold air where it needs to be when it needs to be there, and the hot air away from where it's causing problems.
It reminds me, I'm watching my brother-in-law sail across the Atlantic right now, and one of the maps that is shared shows you all, shows you where all the wind is going, all the heat signature, and so you can watch and you can navigate towards more or less wind. So that's what you're describing. How does the airflow move around this room, and what's hot and what's not?
I mean, it seems pretty simple. You got to get your cold air where it needs to be, when it needs to be in the right amount, and that's at the server inlet. And you got to get the heat away from the equipment because it causes problems. But there's air mixing and all these things, like the hot and cold aisles was a big innovation, 20 years ago.
Right.
Because we used to be in that telco format. But it was fascinating because I get a call from a buddy I'd known for like 20 years, and he's like, hey, we got this thing over here that our deputy CIO bought, and he thought he could put it in a conference room. He's like, I have a space for it.
Well.
And then, he sent me the specs. It's like, we can't put this in any of our data centers. And they called their DR site, and they're like, it was IBM, and they're like, send us the specs. They're like, we can't manage that. So we ended up customizing, like literally it was an intercooler rack, it made a 20 rack pod, and we solved a unique problem. But the flag that went off for me, this is disruptive technology to our space. And I got really lucky with my organizations. Big companies don't move fast or create funky roles, but I'm like, hey, this is disruptive technology to us. Can I start calling on these silicon guys? We always would wait for the market, because if you're Emerson, I considered that 800-pound gorilla, tremendous company, paid dividends. At the time it was 56 years in a row. It's probably 60 now. Right. But they weren't leading edge company. They were what I would call slow faller. But when they moved in big. They would either buy the biggest guy, or they would invest and become the biggest guy.
So they like Peter Gross, who says they love innovation as long as it's 10 years old.
Well, as long as it's proven and it's going to be $200 million business at 20% net operating income from day one. Otherwise, it's a drag on earnings. Right. We had some very cool leaders at the time. I'm like, why do we wait? Because our MPDI process and our, they always say you never got fired for buying IBM. Well, you never got fired for buying Liebert either. Right. Because it worked and it was reliable.
We have a lot of it in our data centers.
But because of that, it was a 2-year process when you saw something to when you had a new product, and sometimes that was too late. And the speed of acceleration that we see now is much different. Before it was like a 7-year product cycle. Now it's like 24 months.
Right.
Max.
Right.
Yeah, right, max. So long story short on that is, I said, to me it seems like it all starts at the chip. Mm-hmm. We need to I learned what TDP, total design power, or thermal design power, whatever you want to call it.
What does it mean?
But it's how much power this little chip has.
Right.
And it used to be like 200 watts, 300 watts, and now they're 1.2 kilowatt and 1.3.
Like a rack's worth of power just in the
and then you have 8 of them in one server.
Right.
And you as we chatted before, so we were freaking out on a 26, 28 kilowatt rack to be air cooled, and we solved for that. But it made us realize, and then you start talking to these guys and like, well, hey, we're driving extraordinary business value by accelerating compute.
Let's pause for one second. I don't mean to interrupt you, but just this. So for people who don't understand, for your and my career from 83, let's say, up until 2020, 2019, the normal rack was somewhere between
2 to
1,000
10,
watts,
2 to 10,
at 1 kW,
Yeah.
up to, I would say, an average enterprise on my data center floor was 2,500 kW or so. That was pretty average. The rack had the capacity maybe to get to 8 kW. That's what they would contract for, but 2.5 to 3 kW. And we really didn't see, in spite of going to this meeting, like, okay, maybe you have an outlier that would get to 10 or 12. So when you're talking about 26,000 kW, this is a factor of 300%, 400%. Like this is, it's like saying, hey, there's dragons swimming around in the lake outside. And you're like, there's no dragons.
And in the sky.
And in the sky.
And they
in spite of there's no birds being evident or no geese or anything, everything's gone. And then all of a sudden you hear your first warning is a flame, shot across the bow. So that's what we're seeing where, because we had 20 years or 30 years of this predictable slow growth. And in spite of VM chassis coming, in spite of all these other warnings, and so now we're back up to what you're describing.
Well, yeah, I remember I was at a thing called the Chill Off in 2010.
What do you mean chill off?
So LBNL and Dean Nelson and
Dean Nelson is an executive over at iMasons.
Yeah, at the time he was at Sun, and then he became eBay, and he was like the first guy I ever met that had unlimited funds to find out what the coolest and best way to do things was, and they're very committed to efficiency and optimization. And at that time, there was this humongous drive to, he was like, we have to get to 20 kilowatts a rack, and the average was like 2.
Right.
And what was driving that is a rack had 2 servers instead of now 40.
Right.
Right. And you had your serverless, and it was a space issue. And the most expensive real estate in the world was raised floor.
Right.
So you had to knock down walls, and this compute thing's taking off, and oh my gosh. And then virtualization, and they changed the ASICs on the design of the chip so they weren't going to throw off as much heat because they realized that might be a problem.
Right.
And virtualization, you went from 10% utilization to 50 or 60.
Right.
So 8 racks.
Certainly with the more sophisticated companies.
Yeah. So the push to high density was driven back then kind of by space.
Right.
But other technologies solved it, so that went away.
Right.
Right. But even Emerson saw that coming at the time, and they bought a company called Coology, which was doing cold plate liquid cooling technology. That stuff went on a shelf for 10 years. Right, because there was no market. The problem was solved by technology another way.
Wow.
And
sounds like a hip hop name.
Yeah.
Coology.
Yeah. And so, like one of my best buddies is Fred Barber, and he's now a president of our local Vertiv office. But that's how we get some of our talent we got from there, and he's still to this day one of the best.
You got talent from hip hop?
Yes, we did. Yes, and he's got good moves.
I bet.
Yeah, he's got good
Any
moves.
moves at my age are good moves.
Yeah.
So that's a low bar.
The fact that you're moving,
Exactly.
that we're both moving.
Above ground
every
and
day
moving.
I'm like, hey, baby,
It's a celebration.
I'm up, I'm moving.
Again? Thank you, Lord.
Got to stretch a little bit just to get it. So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. What I heard while I was sleeping. I'm with you. Keep going.
Yeah, but kind of bringing it back to that full circle thing. So this healthcare guy gets this deal, and so I started knocking on doors, and I said, hey. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know Lieber, we know Vertiv, call in our data center. I'm like, no, that's not why I'm here. I need to understand what you're building that's going to mess up my ecosystem, my customers, our architects, our general contractors, our specifying engineers, our colo operators, our cloud providers, our integrators of VAR. You're introducing technologies that we have to react to, and eventually I'm going to be a headwind for you.
Right.
So we got lucky on our vision, and our leaders saw that too. And so I created this, everybody says, what's your title? I'm the Global Director of High Tech Development. I mean, we just made that up because they didn't want to talk to a business development guy, right? Yeah, they wanted me, but yeah, by all means, go to our data center guy because we love your company and your products. I'm like, that's not why I'm here. I want to see your chip roadmap. Well, like, we don't show that to anybody.
Right.
I'm like, you have to show it to me because the things I'm seeing, you won't be able to ship your product unless you talk to us, because I have to enable my partners like ETS to be ready for the cooling requirements, to be ready for the power requirements. So we started on like a 5-year journey with mostly R&D around with the universities, because we didn't even have the products that they needed. They're like, seriously, I had a conversation with one of them, one of the large providers, and they're like, you have nothing we need. We're like 3-4 years ahead of you. All of the slow follower. We love your scale. We love your reliability. We love your global service. And that's why you need to teach me. I mean, literally, at first, it was like, I don't need your stuff. I was very depressed.
Right.
Right. Like, it's like, I looked at your portfolio. I showed them 78 slides. I had, I was at this giant company for the first time because I was always at little boutique guys that had really cool stuff, but never made it out of the trough of disillusionment. Right. And they're like, you have to teach us, because if your dreams come true, how are you going to scale this? We're the biggest in our space at what we do. You need us to know. You need us to teach the QTSs and the specifying engineers. To your point, I have a slide deck. Here's a slide of 30 years. The data center looked the same. Yes, it got more efficient. Footprint got better, but all the pieces were in the same place.
Right. And we had been told a narrative. We didn't realize we hadn't developed this idea. They might be early, but they're not wrong.
Right.
So we've been told or warned that certain things were going to come. They might not know the chip name or exactly, but high density was coming or some of these things. And after a while of crying, I don't even want to say cry wolf, but you're warned about something, you cannot maintain. I don't care if you're warned about a health crisis or whatever. Your body can only maintain a certain level of vigilance and awareness. Eventually, it just gets apathetic, and we weren't paying attention. And the way that can bypass that is if we trust engineer-minded, like if the submarine operators come off of the boat and say, hey, look, we don't want to just tell you what the Air Force thinks they saw. We don't want to just tell you what the analysts are predicting. We saw Leviathan.
Yes.
It's coming, and you got
It's
48
real.
hours. It's real, and here's the scars on the submarine.
Yeah.
Well, now all of a sudden it's, Katie bar the door.
We've been scarred.
and so that's what I think part of that is your persistence, you specifically, but also people like you at Vertiv and others came and said, no. There's a tsunami coming. You shouldn't be fascinated by the water leaving.
Yeah.
You should be concerned about why and what's coming.
Well, and if you're a big wave surfer, it could be the greatest wave you ever rode, or it could crush you.
Yeah,
I mean,
or both.
Yeah, or both. But like we talked about luck. I mean, kind of the stars align. We've spin out, and all of us boom and benefit, unfortunately, from a pandemic where technology had to be rapidly accelerated. Everybody's 5 and 8 year plan became a 2-year plan. Right? And the spend was insane. And that wasn't even being driven really by AI or any of that. That was just
survival.
I need to enable my people to work from home. I need to change. And so that, it was one of the few silver linings of a horrible thing. Yeah, but like we always do as humans in a country, we rallied and we solved the problem. It's like, we have to do this. We have to do it now. I mean, the demands in your company. I mean, I think we by the middle of the pandemic, we had a $4 billion backlog, but some of that was because of supply chain constraints. Now we have even a bigger backlog, but it's because we're all committed to the future, and we need to move faster. And the way to do that is you have strategic partnerships like we have with your organization, and you get these orders and you plan, and we all collaborate and we talk to the chip guys and the server guys, and I think we have a pretty good vision of what's coming, when it's coming, what's going to be required to keep the things that we've built viable, and what does the next generation AI factory look like?
Yeah. Look, I don't think we're wrong about any of it. We may be early, but here's the difference. I feel like one of the things, thank goodness, there were people like Zoom and all kinds of technologies
How about that
were loosely available that hadn't been stress tested. Ironically, also tied to the Discord and things like that, tied to the game industry, because nerdy gamers like me using chips that could do ray tracing for gaming that, oh, by the way, they're amazing for these AI things. The system was stressed and it broke in or frayed in some places. It didn't completely break. But one of the things it did do, I think, for all of us was, thank goodness that bridge held, but it cracked and groaned.
Yep.
And so a lot of the things that
which got our attention, the cracking and groaning.
And so now we're in this race, which can be misunderstood as this is just a capitalist rush. And certainly there is economic benefit for everybody, we hope, involved in it. But a lot of the systems were stressed.
Yeah.
And if we don't build out the infrastructure, whether in some cases it's for AI, big AI data centers, but it's all of it. That's what can be distracting to people. Is it looks like it's just this one big thing. It's the telecom, it's the power, it's the data center. All the components have to be built and have to be much more redundant, and the tools deployed in a much more redundant way for whatever the future thing is. Lord forbid we get an EMP from the sun, or we get some disruption. And so anyway, there's a lot going on. I guess Well, finish your thought, and then I have a question for you. Where are you going to go with that?
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of different drivers that got us to where we're at today. But, for me, and we talked about this before we started, for 30 years, I sold products that were an expense. Every business needed to do accounting and billing and finance and have data to manage their business, but it didn't change humanity.
Right.
It didn't change customer experience. It didn't change speed to market. It didn't. There's companies now that data's their business.
Right.
And you talked about all the different people in data centers. 15 years ago, data centers were not an investment grade asset, and that changed. Right. And you could see this coming, and now it is a lot of capital coming our way because it's a damn good investment in the growth. I mean, I wish we had a crystal ball, but it looks very positive that the demand for the next 5 to 10 years is going to be extraordinary,
Right.
And it's going to require the things that we do. And the risk of that is we're attracting people that don't know our business, right? It's like, well, I built warehouses, I could build a data center.
Right.
Well, hey, guess what? They look the same on the outside. They're not the same on the inside.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's, but to your point earlier, whether it's Jensen's team over at Nvidia, it's the crew at Vertiv, it's the crew at QTS, your competitors, my competitors, there's a certain cadre in there. The people that we attract in all of these organizations, from the military, the people that we attract from the street, a lot of them are first responders, the people that rally around these things, and they may not even know it about themselves. One, you're a doer. Like you do. You don't stupidly do, but an opportunity comes, and sometimes it's brute force, sometimes it is
brute force,
finesse,
whatever works. Yeah.
But it is that there's not a lot of Socratic contemplation of how can I move the leaf while the water's coming down the river canyon. You just get and move the leaf. So that's one. Two, we are connected to mission, purpose. Like it's so easy to be cynical around this. We talk about it all the time. But we resonate. It's almost like the Spartans that would lock shields. And when they lock shields, the shield wasn't in front of them. It was to their neighbor. Right. You lock shield of your neighbor, and your neighbor locked his shield in front of you or her shield in front of you. You're all in. If you fail, your neighbor fails. You're all in, right? And so the people that resonate, introverted, extroverted, it has nothing to do with their gender or their age or their generation or their sexuality or faith. It is, I rally around doing hard things, being a doer, because if it were easy to do, our customers would just do it themselves. They would just go do it themselves. They wouldn't bring it to us. And so we do that. And we rally around these things, and we get quote unquote lucky because we've repaired the nets, we've prepared the ropes, we've done the things. We don't know when the tsunami's coming, but it's coming. We may be early. We may be in a season of rest and plenty and reading and reflection. And what we do then is you live fire drill and drill and drill, so that when the event happens,
you're ready.
You're ready.
And it's automatic.
But now let me ask you this. So I'm really curious, and you're on a pretty tight schedule, so I need to get you out of here in the next 30 minutes or so. I know it's real right now. And I think, well, let me just ask you, is it real? Like, is it a hallucination? And here's why. Because a lot of the people that we talk to with some of the stuff that's in the pipeline, and when I say right now, I know for sure the next 2 or 3 years, because we already own your gear and we're deploying it, right? For what's going to be built over the next 24, 36 months. That's not a secret. The whole world's doing this.
Right.
But what do you think about this next 5 years? Are we going to sit back and figure out, is this enough? And we might have to repurpose and rearrange things, because our customers are also figuring out what those bleeding edge next gen tool sets are going to be, how they're actually going to solve a problem. I was at Yada and I heard a lot of these conversations from the hardware people, the software people. They're not doubting it. It was more of a philosophical conversation. Where are we at in this? What is your spidey sense? Because you get to do both manufacturing side, see what the supply looks like. You're talking to the customers, and you're talking to the operators. So you serve me. We jointly serve up our customers. What's your sense?
I've never been more excited in my life.
I'm tired of your bad attitude. I got to tell you.
And it really comes back to before it was an expense, and now it's a thing that could change humanity and drive value. And I think we're seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of accelerated compute in all of its forms, whether it's GPUs or CPUs.
What do you mean it will change humanity? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, some of the scientific problems that we can solve, some of the healthcare issues we can solve, something that might have taken 18 months to do before, now I can do in a day with this compute power. Something as simple as my neighborhood. I'm blown away when I look at where's my Amazon package, and I'm the 12th spot on the delivery, and he's already in my neighborhood.
Right.
So you think about the efficiency of that there's 12 families that aren't driving to the store.
Right.
But one very efficient vehicle is coming to your house, and he's hitting everybody on the street.
Right.
I mean, that's a simple example. When was the last time you were in a bank?
Yeah.
I mean, we used to go 4 to 6 times a month. I haven't been in a bank in a year.
Yeah.
Other than we had one that was moving.
Do they still have banks in California?
Well, I had a safety deposit box I forgot about that I had to go because they were closing the bank.
Great. What a flex. I have so much excess. I got it in safety deposit boxes. I'm not even sure where they are. Baby, where's the key to that thing?
Well,
do you have?
Well, the funny part is we had to pay to get it drilled because we couldn't find the key, and the paperwork that was in there was no longer meaningful.
What's in there? Just the keys to the rolls. I have no idea. Where is that thing?
Yeah. No, it was funny, but I'm personally very excited. I know my company's very excited.
But are you excited because you're moving product, or because you're excited? Why wouldn't you?
All of the above.
Okay.
So I mean, you look at the business, so large language model. I mean, the thought of it, an LLM, and as they learn and they grow.
And by that you mean like a Chat GPT or Gemini?
I mean, all the information in the world in one spot, and anybody that has a phone can get it. I mean, think about how that speeds things up. I mean, if you've tinkered with Chat GPT or any of the technologies, I mean, it's extraordinary what comes out in a minute.
I love it. The only time I don't love it, so I use it all the time for everything. I shouldn't say for everything. I use it all the time. For example, let me give you one. Do you know John Trout over at CheckHub?
Yeah, not well, but I know of him.
Okay, well, he blew my mind with this.
Yeah.
He gave me this challenge, so I took it up. I was going shopping at 3 or 4 different places. I had 4 or 5 meals in mind.
Yeah.
So I said to this LLM, 2 different LLMs, these are the stores that I shop at. This is the diet I'm trying to stay within. Focus on these kinds of foods, these vegetables, these proteins, etc. I want you to create a path for me from my home at this address to those stores. What should I buy at those stores? Create the meal plans that fit within that.
Oh my gosh.
Find any coupons or whatever and tell me. And I want it to be organic and whatever. Here's my list, as if I was talking to a personal assistant. 90 seconds, it gave me a list of start here, go to this Kroger, get these things. And by the way, these are on sale. But if you wait till Friday, I don't have the coupons yet because it's a Wednesday. It's going to be better. Then go to Publix. So this is the most energy efficient path. This is the food place. This is the aisle you will either specifically find it on because it's a website available, or they're typically found here according to whatever. And then at Costco, do this. Don't forget to make sure you spend at least $500 at Costco because you know how they check your receipt?
Yeah.
I don't think it's to see if they're validating what's in your cart. You just can't leave unless you've spent $500.
That's right.
I'm almost certain.
It is the $500 club. You can't go there to buy one
They
thing.
redirect you over to the electronics to buy some 3-year-old motion camera.
There's no escaping.
But anyway, it did all of those things in moments.
Yeah.
And somebody said, Bill Clayman on here said, that's powering a light bulb, and some people might be concerned. Yeah, but think about the fossil fuel I would have used to drive back and forth, or could I've just have done that in Instacart or Amazon or whatever, and just had it delivered to me, and I continued on with other stuff. So, but could this be? Do you think that maybe I'm certain we're not wrong. I'm not just saying that because we're in this industry. In 1999, we were not wrong laying dark fiber everywhere.
No.
We were not wrong.
No.
But we didn't start filling it really until about 2012.
Yeah. They're kind of like tulips. You got to put the bulbs in the ground. It's
So
just going
do
to be
you
bare
think-
till spring, but spring does come.
What I'm not saying, though, unlike that, and maybe it's just because I'm in the middle of my own partisan lane.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to see your own sin or your own vulnerabilities when in your lane where the slowdown is. Because to me, that little piece of data that we're talking about, that's the idea of the whole world. Whatever that is, that data is your MRI image to reveal the white matter on your brain that maybe you have MS or something else, and I'm going to compare it to 80 other voodoo dolls out of a data set bank of 100 million of them, and find the 80 that are your age, your weight, your genetic profile, basically your little clones,
Right.
and what their treatment protocol was or how they're responding or whatever, so that I could inform a treatment plan for you that's not within a range, but is real time, a specific thing. Though that's what I see, and if that's true, or in like my kid, a new kid coming out of art school who wants to set up her own little Etsy shop, so that you can log into her thing, and using AI tools, she can build a thing, 3D print part of it, sew together the other part of the thing that she wants to put together, and she never has to go open up a brick and mortar or whatever.
Right.
And it's all enabled by these tools, and they all live in a data center. Like that, those are the things, not just the entertainment things.
Well, the operative world is tools.
Tools, yeah.
Right. What is AI? It's a tool.
Yes.
And you know, how you use the tool is up to you. But that example I talked about, the first data center where we're like scratching our head, well, how do we accommodate this 26 kilowatt rack driven by a healthcare provider? That was actually around imaging, like you said, for radiology to minimize false positives on breast cancer and mammograms, and to have earlier detection. And the power of that is, think about, you know, is the doctor in Africa as good as the doctor in Newport Beach, California? Probably not. Not because his brain's not as good, but he doesn't have the resources, the technology, or the tools to do it.
Right.
But if I can enable the doctor in Africa to have the same access to the technology to do early diagnostics, you know, it's not that the doctors aren't great, but the interpretation is important. And if I can get more granular and get it sooner, I can save lives.
Right.
And there's 100 more examples like that beyond just radiology for mammograms. Right.
So, or even make them co-pilot, like using technology where I got the premier guy with all the experience, or woman, and I get the person who's genius but doesn't have the same experience. They have equal set on, equal goggles, virtually. One's literally looking over the shoulders of the other one. So you're transferring experience in real time, just like a simulator, but in real time. So the next one, you can handle some portion of it on your own, whatever.
Yeah.
How powerful is that? Or the EMT that's pulling your children out of the car on the side of the road, that has somebody in their headset, their remote hands basically helping them.
Well, you said simulator. So I get very excited about this whole digital twin thing. Think about all the things we had to learn the hard way. In the field, in the real, on paper it should work. We deploy it. Oops.
Yeah.
There's more. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of unknown unknowns. There's a lot of known unknowns, right? But you think about digital twins and the ability to literally model everything. And you know, in our engagements, we're being pushed very hard by one of our partners that's making us better company. You know, we want to have a digital twin of every product you have, because we want to build this virtual data center, digital twin data center, that we can model any scenario. If this happens, what happens? If the power goes up, if we double the size of the capacity, you were talking about racks earlier. I'm very comfortable that in the next 10 years, every time that there's an architecture change, at a minimum, the power is going to double. Right now, you know, for me, 2023 and 24 was the year of the 43 kilowatt rack, air cooled. A lot of that driven by the H100, but AMD and Intel also have awesome products. You know, that you know, the whole industry is lifting to this challenge. One guy's kind of leading it, but the others aren't going to roll over. Right. They have really smart, great
by
people.
Others, you mean the other chip makers?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we have great
AMD, Intel,
new guys like Cerebras on the floor out there. I mean, there's 6 or 7 of them on the supercompute floor that I saw this week. I mean, and you know, right now the guys that has really been driving the boundary and going past the boundary and doing it at what they like to call the speed of light, it's Nvidia, right? I mean, and it shows up in their valuation. You know, they go from being a gaming card company to a couple of times this year they've been the largest, most valuable company in the world. That's extraordinary, right? And it's because
they still make great gaming cards.
And they still, well, I always tell, you know, so I mentioned to anybody that, I've worked really hard with these silicon companies, and you know, first thing they ask me, can you get me a gaming card?
Of course.
And I call my buddies, I'm like, dude, we can't even get them, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you know,
you need to sit in that Microsoft Flight Simulator. Hey, let me ask you this real quick. I want to come back and talk about power in a second, because That's a powerful word in our world right now. But before we do that, when we talk about all of these things, we're talking about heat.
Yeah.
And when I think of Vertiv, whatever else you do, I think about the ability to cool, mitigate, reject the heat, these sorts of things. I'm trying to get my head around, and we've had a number of mechanical people on here from Train and Lemio and Schneider and others. From your perspective, what are the technologies at a high level, because these aren't a bunch of engineers listening, and is one, is beta beating VHS? Is VHS beating beta? Is it the same, equally applied? Can you help us to understand at the highest level, how is it that, whether it's Vertiv or whoever, is addressing the cooling challenge, and what technologies are in the mix?
Well, air's not going away.
Yes, I would agree.
And it will, even if it's, so basically there's 4 technologies that we've got our fingers in and are watching. And everybody says, well, which one are you marrying? Like, we're marrying them all, and the chip guys will determine which ones we have to use and the actual use cases and applications. But there's immersion technology, both single and 2-phase.
And what does that mean? When you say immersion?
Literally, it's a tank.
Okay.
It could be vegetable oil in the old days. The fluids are getting a lot more sophisticated. Big companies like Shell are moving into the space. Okay. And you literally immerse the whole server in the tank, and it rejects all the heat. Okay. But it has limitations. We talked about this TDP, thermal design power, and there's, not to get too technical, but this thing called heat flux and how the chip reacts. So there's a lot of people, and the barrier to entry in that is pretty small. So there's like 150, immersion companies out there, and they have that one thing, and they're going to say, of course, it's the best. And you know what? There are use cases. It is a very good technology.
Right.
There's a 2-phase technology that's probably a couple of years behind that, that rejects heat even better, a little more complicated, a little more sophisticated. There's some fluid challenges that are getting worked through. So you have your immersion technologies, and then you have your direct liquid to the chip, DLC. Okay. And DLC can be a water, but then you have to do all the biocide stuff. Most of it is it's a water glycol mix. The most popular is a thing called PG25. It makes it green or orange.
And it pipes it right to the chip on the motherboard?
It goes to what they call a cold plate, which is usually copper, and it sits on top of the chip, and it extracts the heat off of the chip. Okay. And puts it in a liquid loop, and then we go out to, like you mentioned earlier, we have our heat rejection systems that we can leverage and do that. And right now, I would say 85% of our activity is around that direct liquid to the chip technology that's using PG25 and the CDU to pump it. And then the 4th technology that is 2-phase. We've announced a 2-phase to the chip capability. We've actually been doing 2-phase technology back to the early 2000s. Our XD product back in 2000 was our high density product. It was a refrigerant product. Our most successful product that you've bought a lot of was our DSC, waterless pumped refrigerant product, right? And now, which really brings up an interesting time that you and all of our partners have been involved in. It's like, we love Vertiv. We have a great relationship. We have 20,000 plus of our DSC systems out there. You took great pride in advertising. We're not consuming water like the other guys. And all of a sudden now there's a need for a liquid loop in your waterless data center, and you're going, what have you done? Right? And the good news is we have answers for that, and we're developing products that we can create a liquid loop like our XDM product, not to get specific and advertise, but you need the ability to have a liquid loop at the rack level or the row level. And we, fortunately, we have the ability to enable that. But those are the basic 4 technologies, right? You have single-phase immersion, 2-phase immersion, single-phase direct liquid to the chip, and 2-phase. All of them, I feel, are going to have a role. There's going to be a use case. Everybody that only has one thing is going to say, this is the only one that works. So there's a lot of confusion in the market. It reminds me of 10 years ago when there was 50 DCIM vendors. It's a very immature space. So some of it has significant cost of entry. Some of it has insignificant cost of entry. There's a lot of players, like all businesses. There'll be a maturity process. There'll be consolidation. But on the SC24 floor, there is at least 50 liquid cooling companies. Last year there was
SG24 was the
Supercompute 24. That is why I'm in town. When we finally get together.
Right. Yeah. Was it just my beautiful smiling face? You had to be lured here by another.
Well,
That's okay.
Our shared problem is you and I travel a lot.
That's true.
And your gear is awesome, and you can't take it everywhere.
That's true.
Yeah.
When you were talking about these things about, as you were walking through that product set, it reminded me of all things of the military. And so why this is so important to us solving this. One, my mission is to deliver for our customers an environment that they can operate within. So that's our mission.
Yep.
Just like the military. The military has two things they have to do or they fail. They have to accomplish the mission, whatever that is.
Yep.
The second thing they have
to do it faster than the bad guy.
They have to, as Patton said, let the other soldier die for his country, right?
They call it the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And he who does it fast survives.
Amen. Exactly, right? The quick and the dead, as they used to say in the West.
Yeah.
But anyway, you have to accomplish your mission. There are parameters for that. Uniform Code of Military Justice, the Geneva Convention, whatever, accomplish the mission. But there's a second thing, equal in importance, and that is troop welfare.
Yep.
So when we're talking about working at stabilization, water out of the design, there might be a little bit needed for humidity or for whatever it is that we're doing. But it is, once it's at stabilization, it's at operational the way it's supposed to be, little to no impact. Why? That troop welfare part is, I live in a community. Why this is so important is not just do I want to serve my customer in the performance specs, but I also want to serve my constituency, my community base that I live within, because we want to be good neighbors. It's our aquifer too.
Yes.
It's our clean air too. It's our urban landscape. So we want to do urban planning so that it's not noisy. The traffic is makes sense and is under the jobs, the tax base, all of those things. If we can get super efficient in this data center environment, but we mess up troop welfare or mess up our environment, we lose.
No, we have to be part of the solution, not the problem.
That's exactly right. And so that's why we here we go, this is not an infomercial, but one of the reasons why I really enjoy getting to spend time with your senior leadership, not just you, is the emphasis on the back end as we solve these problems. How also, I've heard Schneider talk about these things too, how also we must be good citizens, not a marketing soundbite, but in and out, like you guys are doing in Columbus, Ohio. I know you're doing it in other cities as well. But anyway, I think it's important that we're talking about technical solutions, but we also always have this heart of, how am I a good community partner?
Well, it's a very rare thing where what you have to do is actually the better thing. And our ecosystem has done a very bad job of patting ourselves on the back for the things that we've driven, but I am 100% convinced, and I think I could argue and prove, nobody's done more for renewables than the data center ecosystem. We put our money, everybody talks about it, adopt it, but you look at what the cloud guys forced us to do, and let's face it, they did it, not us. We were reactionary, but we also realized, wow, this is good, and our efficiency is improving, and our consumption's going down, and I can grow. But nobody's done more for solar and wind and hydro and all the different technologies that are renewable. Our industry embraced it because, it was good for the community, but it also was good for the business. I saved money. I was more efficient.
And they partnered with us. Like, they put their money where their mouth is. They said, we'll do long-term leases. We will pay you. You cannot do business with us if you don't achieve these efficiencies and have these initiatives.
And they made us all better.
And they made us all better.
And now the chip guys are making
because
us all
they're
better.
Partners.
Right?
It's not just go do it, solve it, take all the risk, and then come back and talk to us. No, they partnered, and now we're benefiting. And part of you've got to get out of here in about 5 minutes. But can we just end with this? I think that part of what we need to do is get better at telling our story, to evangelize. I don't mean marketing points if they're not the truth. I just mean talking about the truth, going into conversations, and not every. You and I are not. We have introverted moments, but we're not introverts. A lot of the people in our business, though, are introverts, and I like to appeal to them. Always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. Like, why do you want to be a mechanic at a data center? Why do you want to work in the optics or whatever? There's a reason why you want to do it. So tell that positive story. And then those of us who spend more time, as an actual evangelist, be prepared to wade into uncomfortable conversations, not as an antagonist, but to listen and to be able to defend, first hear, and then give a truthful, accurate answer. So make sure you know what the truth is, and then you're able to do that. And I think we have an opportunity then, in more cases than not, for people to buy in. But also we have to be willing to be transparent, hold us accountable. We have nothing to hide if you're truthful and transparent.
Transparency, times of great change require times of great collaboration.
Yeah.
And, when things were rinse and repeat, we all went in our little silos because nobody needed help building a data center because we know how to do that. The technology did not change that much in 30 years.
Right.
This is a very disruptive time. Cold plates are coming into your building. Rack manifolds are coming in your building. Row manifolds are coming in your building.
Right.
Different types of liquid cooling are coming into your building. We have an obligation to leverage the $1 trillion of data centers that have already been built and made them viable with the new technology. We also have an obligation to have reference designs and architectures to what does the next generation AI factory look like?
Right.
Is it bigger? Is it smaller? We always like to say we're trying to look at this very holistically, from literally the chip to the atmosphere and the thermal chain and all the pieces, and from the chip to the substation on the electrical side. And it's all going to change. And it is changing, right? And it's being driven by the density of these chips. But, you've heard me say this. We have to make data centers something people want to live by.
Right.
We produce jobs. We spin off tax revenue. All that's good. But our planet has a challenge with energy.
Right.
We're electrifying everything: cars, toasters, everything at your house, all the devices we carry.
Right.
Yes, data centers are consuming more energy, but we're also doing, I think, more positive. But then we used to doing accounting and billing. Right. I mean, I am so proud of what we do in our business. You used to talk to the Uber guy. What do you do? Data center. It glazes over. It's accounting finance. What do you do? I was like, I'm changing the world.
Right.
I'm enabling healthcare advancements. We might solve the sustainability problems and environmental problems because now I have data that was not even available.
Right. Certainly wasn't organized.
Right. Well, and it's funny because the story I have to tell you, look at the GPUs, accelerated compute, even accelerated CPUs. I could probably solve that problem eventually using the old technology, but I might have to run it for 2 years.
Right.
And God forbid it breaks in that 2 years.
And the amount of power.
And the 2-year power.
Right.
Or I can run it in 3 minutes.
Right.
And I have it now.
Right.
And yes, that rack used more power. So somehow we have to be able to articulate the value that we're driving to the energy that we're consuming.
Right.
And everybody's trying to find that metric.
Yeah.
I think the closest we ever came when Dean was at eBay. And he had a cost per transaction.
Right.
The rest of our businesses aren't that simple where we sold something, how much power did it take?
Right.
Much more complex.
Yeah.
But there has to be a relationship between what are we enabling and what is the value to humanity. I am absolutely convinced that we can get to a point where people are like, I want a data center in my community because it's going to stabilize my grid.
Right.
Right. And instead of them having to call me to turn down my data center when there's no power, they're going to call me and say, can I get some power? And oh, by the way, the power I'm going to give you is going to be renewable.
Right.
And it's going to be highly efficient. And to me, that's an amazing opportunity. But we have to communicate that.
We have to communicate. We have to get good at first listening, not just wading in with our charts to say, look, sit down and let me save you.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Right.
I've been married almost 38 years. Never once has
plus.
that. Yeah, never once has that worked.
Yeah.
I need to sit down and really listen because I might completely change my narrative, or I may not say a darn thing. She may get there by herself, or I may have to change what I'm thinking because what I thought I was going to save is not it. But to your point, data center, I truly believe does all these good that we're talking about. Yep. They're a morally neutral tool that can be used to amplify things for flourishing or wasted opportunity.
Right.
So we need to amplify it for good. But here's the really great kicker. For all of that, 10 years ago, the cost of that application might have been a watt. So even though the data centers are getting bigger, that watt goes 1,000 times further.
Yep.
While the requirement, the easy understanding of that is your TV. You used to have a plasma TV that weighed 200 pounds. You hung it on the wall. You got a suntan if you were too close. It was 40 inches, and your lights dimmed. Now, my 70-inch LED, I can lift with a finger. I can see the pores on the cheetah's face. And it is it uses 1/100th of the power. So that screen that the surgeon's looking in to remove the tumor from your child's brain
to save
is
his life
exponentially, or for your virtual classroom or whatever it is exponentially more powerful with quantum dots and everything, but at 1/100th of the power requirement. And the optics to move things there and the electrons. I'm not saying we take our eye off the ball on being good stewards. That's woven into the DNA of your organization, my organization, our industry.
Well, and it's good business.
It's good business.
That's the part that didn't exist for all businesses.
But we have people are getting paid well. These are long, sticky jobs. It's not manufacturing. This thing, and I love manufacturing, but that can be moved around. This is data sovereignty. So now we're just getting into the whatever. Greg, look, I can't wait for the next one. We've got, as I said, 20 things that I want to. Maybe next time I'll make you tear up with some more personal, emotional stories. But
I love it.
Thank you for coming on the show.
David, thanks for having me here.
I look forward to having you on next time.
Really fun time, exciting opportunities, and I show up every day, as I know you do, loving the challenges ahead of us and the opportunity they represent. Because our companies are in good places. We work with great people. The collaboration that's happening between, the most successful engagements I've had in the last 2 years, the cloud guy, the colo guy, the chip guy, and us are in a room, and we're all doing things that haven't been done before ever. First of kind stuff happening right now, and it's pretty fun.
Why I resonate so much with you, Greg, is this, because your personal mission, I think, is very similar to mine. I want to help human beings flourish. One of the things you didn't talk about, we don't have time now, but we all have intern programs. We're going into some communities that are in tough spots and pulling people from those communities into our world and giving them internships and opportunities that they might not have to weave up. And maybe we pick this up next time. But man, let's just go help change the world for better. So
we're doing it. People ask you, what do we do now in New Bryce? I'm making the world a better place. And of course, they're going to ask how. And we have a story.
We have a story.
We have a story to tell.
Greg, thanks for coming on. Hey, if you liked the show, click the like button. And if you loved it, subscribe. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.